What's up guys, it's Jordan here with our review of Ara Fell on the Nintendo Switch. This review was written by a new writer for us, Paige, who writes for a few websites as well as her own YouTube channel. These are her words, not mine, so let's find out what she thinks of this 16-bit style RPG. Released a few years prior on PC, Ara Fell has now been given an enhanced edition that's releasing on all major platforms, including the Nintendo Switch. And this version comes with an updated user interface and new difficulty modes, amongst other changes. It was inspired by classic RPGs, an attempt at mixing both Western and Japanese, but whether it lives up to that standard is another tale entirely. The story is set in the world of Ara Fell, unsurprisingly, a skylands where the people were lifted up to protect them from the abyss of the undead below. The main character Lita starts off helping her friend Adrian to find a ring before an archery competition. Some things lead to others, and she ends up getting more of an adventure than she bargained for. While talks of war against the vampires brew, Lita and her companions begin to run into them while uncovering the mystery of the Elven Ring. The history and events of the world are well integrated into the main story. There is a slight comedic tone in the character interactions, but the story does have some touching moments too, such as its portrayal of the father and daughter relationship. The focus is largely on our heroine, who struggles with the role of the unwitting hero. So Ara Fell is an adventure game with exploration and turn-based RPG combat. The combat itself is rather basic with turn orders, buffs, ailments, and skills that use MP. It's the kind that heals you after every fight, meaning you can use your skills with little fear. Dying in battle, assuming there isn't a full party wipe, does have the consequence of stat reduction, though that can be healed at an inn or from the travelling merchant who often appears in dungeons. So unless you're unwilling to walk back a bit, it's not much of a punishment. The only special mechanic is an ultimate skill that charges throughout multiple fights. Every party member has their own skill, and Lita needs to use the whole bar for hers. Upon level up, stat points can be added to 4 different stats, but it's best to stick with what the character has already. I played most of the game in hard difficulty, yet honestly, it was still quite easy until like halfway through the game, and even then the only challenge was in the boss fights. The differences I saw were largely that enemies had higher health pools. There is something called story mode that allows you to instantly kill anything you fight. Since you can switch between these 4 difficulties freely, it can be a good idea to use the story mode to grind, as the generic monster fights are just brainless regardless. Most of my encounters needed no change in tactics and felt like the same fight over and over again. Thankfully, the boss fights do increase a little in the latter half of the game. The exploration aspect is one that I enjoyed and led me to spending quite a few hours doing it than I expected. Part of this is because there are items you can collect through ores, flowers, and fish, which are important for crafting. At a few points throughout the game, you're advised to get stronger or spend some free time, which you may do by taking some side quests, collecting bounties, or come across areas with stronger enemies a bit too soon. Aside from that, getting around can be a bit confusing, as the difference between layers and obstacles, isn't always readily apparent. In dungeons, there are puzzles, but they're so basic it seems like a waste of time. Most of them have a hint right next to them and involve a lot of hitting buttons in the right order. Later on, you'll be able to fly between a couple of spots to access areas you couldn't previously, but it is quite restrictive. Sadly, moving the character around the world is difficult without a proper D-pad, as she'll easily move too far in one direction with the Joy-Cons. Switching to a Super Nintendo pad, the issue was resolved almost entirely, but it makes for somewhat of an unpleasant experience for anyone without one of those, as you'd often run into monsters more often, and there are time sections involving finer movements. Water traversal is also quite common, but slows down the speed and in larger sections can be really annoying. As far as I could tell, there were no options to make battles or text move faster. It's a very slow game. Instead of needing to buy equipment, it can be upgraded with the items you earn through the adventure. Crafting is quite simple. Each piece of the equipment has required items for an upgrade, and when fulfilled, you can craft them into a new item. As such, there's no need to replace equipment, as it's done by adding to it. Once upgraded, every party member's artifact can receive enhancements, which might be a buff or chance to poison with normal attacks. Potions to heal or harm can also be crafted. This system helps to make the exploration feel rewarding, as it's where you find ingredients, enhancements, and the orbs needed to upgrade character skills, though ingredients can be earned at the end of combat or bought from merchants. In terms of gameplay overall, having your health and magic refresh after every battle reflects in the balancing and tactics of the game, but in regular combat there's just not enough to mix things up. Partnered with the slow pace, it makes for boring battles outside of the stronger boss fights. The exploration gives you a reason to run into more monsters and helps make you stronger outside of, finding secrets. With some issues, the adventure gameplay is a bit more compelling than the turn-based combat. Okay, moving on to audio, the one thing I found quite odd was that the music doesn't change when in battle. Instead, it's the same atmospheric music as in the area that you're in. Boss fights are the exception to this. Some locations had quite nice music, but the lack of change felt jarring, especially with some of the quieter places. Thematically, it is appropriate with the forest having a more lively tune than the ambient caves. Some tracks are pleasant and of higher quality than the usual RPG Maker games, but nothing that really stuck in my mind. Surprisingly, some songs had vocals in the form of subtle chanting rather than lyrics, whereas for dialogue, not unexpectedly, there is no voice acting here. In terms of visuals and performance, Ara Fell was made with quite an older version of RPG Maker, so the visuals certainly aren't fantastic. Despite that, there is lots of detail, like in the constant falling snow, critters running around, and butterflies. From what I've seen in the updates to the user interface in both battle screen and menus is a welcome improvement. Now including a turn order displayed in battle, there is a bit of animation, though it is fairly minimal. With the exception of monsters and some NPCs, a lot of them are unique or at least spread far enough apart that I didn't notice them being the same. Talking to characters displays portraits, and while they're not the prettiest, it is better than not having them. Certain bosses have much larger and better artwork though, and they still fit in with the rest of the world. Given the relative simplicity of Ara Fell, I didn't encounter any performance issues or bugs throughout my playthrough. In terms of value, I expected this game to take around 10 hours, but due to the semi-open world, it took me a little bit over 15 to beat. The length may be affected by your difficulty, seeing as the story mode lets you skip as much combat as you choose. The American price is $14.99 and it's £16.19 in the UK. In terms of money to time ratio is close to providing the quality of game that you'd expect from the price. For the time being, the game is only available digitally. And as a side note from me, Jordan, I'm interrupting here, the publisher did say to me that while there were no current plans to release Ara Fell physically, if the game did sell well enough, they may look into it. Are you enjoying this review so far? If you are, be sure to let Paige know in the comments, and also give a thumbs up and a subscribe if you're new here. Before we jump into Paige's conclusion, I do want to point out a giveaway that's going on right at this moment. We're giving away a lovely It'll Do collector's edition from One Print Games. Check out what that's all about in last Monday's physicals video where I lay it all out to you. And if you don't want to do that, there is a Twitter link in the description and pinned comment directly to the competition itself. So get on that in case you missed it. You really don't want to miss out. It's a lovely collector's edition. You have until Sunday to enter that. Alright, back to Ara Fell. In conclusion, Ara Fell has some decent touches with a few sweet story moments and visual details. The addition of more difficulties is good, but even on the second hardest it's still quite easy for far too long. The slow and simple combat does no favors in comparison to the sizable world that there is to explore. I did enjoy collecting items to upgrade and craft, but not much else. While not poorly written, the plot itself is nothing special, and that's how most of the game feels. Nothing special. It's a 5 out of 10. Thanks very much to Paige for writing this review and recording the gameplay for us. You can find her YouTube channel in the description if you want to hear her lovely Australian accent. She also writes reviews for Ladies Gamers and Nintendad, and hopefully more for SwitchWatch in the future. Right now, we suggest you check out a couple of our videos: Monday's Physicals Releases video, Sunday's Bargains video, and why not check out a review? Deep Sky Derelicts, which I believe came out on the Switch yesterday. We hope to see you guys over there. Thank you very much. Take care.